Welcome to Ethics Uncovered, the podcast that examines the moral complexities at the intersection of science and society. I'm Gali, joined by my co-hosts Andres and Aman. Today we're tackling a question that has haunted research for decades. Is it ethical to withhold the real truth of a scientific experiment from human participants? From psychological studies to biomedical trials, deception has been both a tool of discovery and a source of profound harm.
To guide us through this labyrinth, we'll draw on historical cases, fictional allegories, and insights from Dr. Silvana Torres, an animal scientist at NC State who shared her experiences via email. Dr. Torres reminds us that while her work focuses on livestock, the core ethical principles, transparency, justification, and minimizing harm, are still universal.
Let's begin with the chilling parallel between fiction and reality. Stephen King's House Star features a clinical trial where participants are injected with Lasix, a drug described only as a mild hallucinogenic. The true purpose is to induce psychic abilities is concealed, leading to generational trauma and government persecution. This mirrors real-world ethical disasters like Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where researchers withheld treatment from a black man for 40 years to observe the disease's progression.
The last six example exemplifies authorized deception gone wrong. Participants weren't merely kept in the dark, they were manipulated into a life altering experiment without understanding the risks. Dr. Torres notes that the animal research to experiment in harm would be violating the three R's principle: replacement, reduction, and refinement. Yet in human trials, the line between necessary deception and exploitation remains contested.
The Belmont Report, a cornerstone of research ethics, mandates that participants receive comprehensible information to make informed decisions. But, as psychologist Martin Orne observed, even partial disclosure alters behavior. In his 1962 study, subjects unconsciously conform to perceived expectations, rendering results unreliable if they knew the true hypothesis. Does this mean some deception is scientifically necessary?
Consider the 1973 Good Samaritan experiment. Seminary students were told that they were preparing for a sermon, unaware that the real test would be whenever they would stop to help a distressed actor. Those in a hurry rarely did, finding impossible without deception. Yet, unlike Firestarter or the Tuskegee experiment, participants were debriefed afterwards, aligning with modern standards that require post-study transparency.
Tuskegee's legacy looms large here. By 1947, penicillin was the standard syphilis treatment, yet researchers actively denied it to subjects, offering free burials instead to secure autopsy access. Dr. Torres emphasized that such exploitation violates the Belmont Report's principles of justice, protecting vulnerable populations from hearing disproportionate risks.
Post-Tuskegee reforms led to institutional review boards, or IRBs, which Dr. Torres describes as gatekeepers of ethical integrity. These boards evaluate studies for risks, inform constant protocols, and debriefing plans. But loopholes do still exist. The Department of Defense's 1975 guidelines, for instance, allow temporary information withholding in military contexts if operational necessity outweighs the risks.
Balancing autonomy and scientific rigor is messy. But in cancer research, physicians routinely once hid diagnoses for patients, believing that ignorance reduced the distress patients would have. But by 1979, 97% of the population advocated for transparency, a shift driven by recognizing that paternalism often causes more harm than truth. This cultural revolution laid the groundwork for today's informed consent standards.
Dr. Torres draws a stark contrast between human and animal research ethics. While humans can consent, animals rely on committees to enforce human treatment. She notes studies may be approved even if they involve harm, as long as they're justified by scientific advancement. This utilitarian approach for contentious, especially when applied to humans in high stakes trials.
Let's hear directly from Dr. Torres. In her email, she writes, ethical review boards act as gatekeepers, ensuring research is conducted responsibly while balancing scientific progress with moral considerations. They verify that benefits and risks are fairly distributed. This underscores the role of oversight in preventing other Tuskegee.
She also highlights a key distinction. In human research, intentionally inflicting harm is prohibited unless part of a consented medical treatment. For animals, some harm is permitted if justified by the benefits. This dichotomy raises tough questions. If a dementia drug trial requires deceiving participants about placebo use, thus the potential benefit to millions outweigh the individual autonomy violations.
Beauchamp and Childress, Principles of Biomedical Ethics, offer a framework: respect for autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. But as Dr. Torres implies, these principles are rendered inert when researchers withhold information. The Log 6 study violates all four participants weren't autonomous, were harmed, received no benefits, and were unjustly targeted due to their vulnerabilities.
Just got it.
Beauchamp and Childress, Principles of Biomedical Ethics, offer a framework: respect for autonomy, non-maleficence, benefits, and justice. But as Torres implies, these principles are rendered inert when researchers withhold information. The Law 6 study violated all four. Participants were autonomous, were harmed, received no benefits, and were unjustly targeted due to their vulnerability.
Modern guidelines permit deception and minimal risk studies if debriefed afterwards. For example, psychologists might hide a study's true focus on conformity to avoid skewing results. But IRBs require justification. Why is deception necessary? Can't the questions be answered another way?
Contrast this with military research. The Department of Defense's 1975 directive that allowed withholding information during Cold War era mind control experiments. Many subjects were soldiers, and the war that they'd been given LSD. Unlike the Good Samaritan study, these individuals weren't debriefed for decades, a breach of the social contract between science and society.
Dr. Torres' work with IACUC committees reveal another layer. Animal research demands justification for each subject's use, whereas human trials prioritize consent. This asymmetrical highlights a moral hierarchy. Yet both realms share a common goal: advancing knowledge without dehumanizing or de-animalizing participants.
So, where do we draw the line? The Belmont Report mandates that risks be reasonable in relation to anticipated benefits. For Dr. Torres, this means animal studies must clear a high bar. Researchers must demonstrate no viable alternatives exist. Should human trials face even stricter scrutiny, though?
Transparency is key. In the 1979 study in cancer disclosure shows that honesty, while painful, builds trust. Similar IRBs now require authorized deception clauses and consent forms. Participants know some details will be withheld but agree anyway. This middle ground respects autonomy while enabling critical research.
Stephen King's fictional shop agency serves as a warning. Without oversight, science becomes predation. As Dr. Torres concludes, deception can be a tool, but it must be wielded with caution, wisdom, and safeguards. Whether studying seminary students or syphilis, the answer lies in balancing human dignity with the relentless pursuit of the truth.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through ethics, fiction, and science. Special thanks to Dr. Sylvia Torres for her insights. If you have questions or any topics you'd like us to explore, reach out on social media.
Remember, the quest for knowledge should never come at the cost of our humanity. Until next time, stay curious and compassionate.
This has been Ethics Uncovered. I'm Gabi, signing off with Andres and Amani.